Welcome back, everyone, to day two of creation. Now, previously, we examined the factors that surround the first day of creation within the biblical text in the book of Genesis. Now, before we continue, I must tell you, you must use the 1611 or authorized King James Version of the Bible. No other Bible will come anywhere close to it because there are only 139 word differences between that and the original text. But now, with these things being said, let us continue on what we've discovered. We've discovered that there are generations of heaven. First generation being God Almighty, who's better known as El Shaddai. Now, he has two sons. The firstborn is Lucifer, whom now is capable of being identified. His secondborn son is none other than God the Father, who is also now capable of being identified. It's the same thing as the balance between good and evil, the yin and yang. There's a perpetual struggle between them, which is symbolized by their design of the let's say of the yin and the yang symbol. But however, no one has ever stopped to think who balanced good and evil, because Lucifer did not fear God the Father. He attacked him. So you don't attack what you fear. But with that being said, now you understand who it is that Lucifer fears. He fears El Shaddai, God Almighty. The same way a father and son share the same relationship. There's nothing new under the sun. That which is has already been done. Men follow along the exact same path established by God Almighty and the conflict that existed between his two sons. Now there are a lot of very important factors that have been suppressed and actually falsely promoted to today's masses. But now we are going to remove all of these misconceptions and false promotions as we continue through this word for word, verbatim examination of the biblical text and the days of creation. Because if you cannot get through Genesis 1 through 31, there's no way for you to understand the text. You will not understand anything else within the book. Now, with these things being said, let us start with the second day of creation at the text of Genesis 1:6 through 8, which specifically says, "And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters." Now, what must be understood is that the reference to the waters is a reference to the peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, as it was determined by the biblical text itself. Now, when he said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, that means he put a division. He put guidelines in between good and evil. Now, this division between the waters actually substantiates that he also gave Lucifer water, which means that he gave Lucifer his own people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Now, why would he give Lucifer first? He's the firstborn. So therefore, now he has to give the secondborn, who's none other than the Father. So now he also gives him his own water, which equals peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Now, therefore, it should be completely understood that everyone does not belong to God. Lucifer has his own peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, and so does the Father. He has his own peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. However, as we continue, you come to notice that within the text, Genesis 1:6, it continues to say, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. It's pluralized. So this is one form of water, and this is another form of water. So this covers the two waters. But now he also says, and the word and means in addition to. In addition to that, he says, let it divide the waters from the waters. Now we have the implementation of the another waters, pluralized, which substantiates the beginning of the physical. There can be no debate. It's scientifically substantiated that this planet is 80% water. Therefore, who would he be doing this for? That question comes in the hierarchy, in the hierarchical structure of the heavens. Because the firstborn is normally the one who would proceed the king. So this means that Lucifer would get this. Now, although this may seem fantastical at the second, it's about to make complete sense. Because verse 7 says, now, this is the most unique part. And God made. To create is to bring into existence from nothing. Made means to give shape from what was created. Give rise or give shape to what was created. Therefore, God made is a reference to the Father. The same way as if you went outside and you started building a doghouse and you start bamming and hammering and you put your hammer down and your son will come out, he's going to pick up the hammer and try to emulate what he's seeing you do. He's going to try to do the exact same things that you're doing. God the Father is watching God Almighty. Therefore, after God Almighty made the firmament in the middle, which gave them 10 rules, there are actually 10 rules that exist between good and evil. However, how many people know this? Now, verse 7 continues to say, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. He comes up and he does this. God Almighty separates good and evil. God the Father comes back and separates the spiritual from the physical. Now, and it was so. And it was so is specifically unique and can only be applied to the physical world. Why? Because everything in the physical form comes to an end. And it was so. So because nothing in spiritual dies. It has to be destroyed by none other than El Shaddai. But now, and it was so means it applies to the physical side. So we're going to put, and it was so. Because this is paramount. This is paramount in comprehending and ascertaining what this text is telling you. Now, verse 8 says, and God called, which is a reference to the Father. He called the firmament heaven. Capitalized means it had, when the word's capitalized in the middle of the sentence, it means that it has a spiritual implication. Therefore, the word heaven is here. So this is heaven. Because now, there can be no debate that there are two heavens. We have a physical heaven, which is the expanse of the sky, but then you have the spiritual heaven, which is the abode and the home of God Almighty, El Shaddai, and God the Father. Okay? And the evening and the morning were the second day. The evening, remember, means the equal distribution. So now he gave both of his children. Then he gives him. So now, being that he's already given Lucifer, it means that he has to come back and do what? He also has to give the Father. Now, this is the most unique part. Verse 9. This brings us into the third day of creation. And God said, who will be God Almighty, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place. When he says, let the waters under the heaven, he's a reference to this. Let them be gathered unto one place. This happens. So now they're gathered together unto one place. And he says, and in addition to that, let the dry land appear. Now the word land is italicized because there was no previous English word that could compare to what was being stipulated in the ancient Hebrew language. So now he says, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. So this happens. Now we've got a planet. But in addition to that, this happens. Dry land. Oh, surprise. I bet you didn't know anything about this. Because now let's substantiate all these factors. Because it says, verse 10, and God called, who would be a reference to God the Father, he called the dry land earth. Notice earth is capitalized in the middle of the sentence. It means it applies to the spiritual side, not the physical. This is earth. And now pay close attention to this, because it says that God the Father called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters, called he, Lucifer, seas. This is called the seas. Now, the name Lucifer only appears in the biblical text one time, but they refer to him. And when they make reference towards Lucifer, they utilize the word he. Why? Because there was some mention his name in the original Hebrew language is to summon him. Now, therefore, we've just solved another enigma, because this is the physical planet that we call Earth, but that's the planet that God calls Earth. Now, what's so unique about all of this is that with this understanding, you can also understand some of the implications of the biblical text. Because when you turn to the book of Revelations, chapter 21, it specifically states, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. Because everything in the physical comes to an end. There's no debate about that. Global warming establishes this. Now, all things about to be revealed. So now, when we return back to the text of Genesis chapter 1, verse 10, Genesis 1:10 specifically states again, and God the Father called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. Lucifer called seas. And God Almighty saw that it was good, because he gave both of his sons. There was no conflict, and they were getting along. It's the same as if you give one son a basketball and you give one son a football, and you tell them go outside and play. You're going to stand back and look out the window and see if they start playing together, or whether or not they're going to fight over each other's possession. Sometimes some of these things make me speechless. But however, as we continue on because we're in the third day now, all right, and God said, which would be God Almighty, let the earth, it's lowercase, so that applies to here. Why did they do that? Because if the information would have not been spiritually discerned, it would have been destroyed. We would have never been restored our heritage. You would never know any of this. So now, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, Lucifer's kind. whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. And it was so. So now, here's another unique factor about it. He uses, once again, he utilizes 4 words. He uses, let the earth bring forth what? Grass, grass, herbs, seed. I put fruit with this because fruit is also the same necessary to produce seed, and fruit tree. Once again, we have the utilization of 4 words by God Almighty to simply establish every plant form in existence: grass, herb, seed, fruit, and fruit tree. That's it. That covers all plant life on this planet. All. Now, being that he just did it again for one son, because the old adage that has been passed down through oral tradition for countless generations has stipulated and given us the keys to the biblical text. It specifically states, do not give one child unless you give the other. Because other than that, you're going to what? Promote jealousy. You've just established the line between your children. So now, being that God Almighty just did that for Lucifer, he has to now do what? The same for the Father. It's not a repetitive text. It's 2 completely different things. He's giving both of his sons the same way every parent would do with their children. Now, because there's no way that you're going to go and buy one child something to eat and not feed the other. At least I would love to think so. But today's society is gone haywire. So now, this brings us to verse 12, because at the end of verse 11, it says, and it was so, which means that level of physical substantiation of creation is done. So now he has to also provide for God the Father. So verse 12 says, and the earth brought forth, grass, herb, yielding seed after his kind, spiritual side, and the tree yielding fruit. Now, the most unique part about this is that he does not say fruit tree. He says tree yielding fruit. The fruit tree is physical. The tree yielding fruit is spiritual. Therefore, he had to give him 4 trees. On the spiritual side, now you understand this. We have 4 trees. The tree of tree of tree of tree of. Now, here it goes. He says, and verse 12 again, and the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, God the Father's kind, of a spiritual nature, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. He gives him, then he gives him, and he looks back and saw that they're getting along, so everything was good. Now, but the most unique part about this is to understand that when God Almighty gave God the Father these trees, he gave him what? A spiritual tree. And the biblical text tells us a very spiritual tree that sat in the midst of the garden, the tree of knowledge. Now, what's so unique about knowledge is that you're eating right now by watching this. You're eating knowledge. Now, but knowledge produces a fruit. Now, once you obtain knowledge, the fruit of knowledge produces the seeds for the tree of what? The next insubstantial tree is wisdom. Let me move this here real quick so you can see what I'm saying. The tree of wisdom. Now, you can't get wisdom without first obtaining knowledge. Now, when you get wisdom, wisdom also produces the fruit that produces the seed of another insubstantial tree that can't be denied. Once you eat from the tree of knowledge, you gain wisdom. Once you eat from the tree of wisdom, you gain understanding. Now, once you've eaten from the tree of understanding, you are therefore entitled to eat from the last and greatest tree that's of a spiritual nature, the tree of life. So now, it's the text specifically says, and the evening and the morning were the third day. Now, I just read this and illustrated all of this word for word. It did not take 6 days to make this planet. It only took 3. But now, we know that these trees exist because we eat of these trees on this physical side right now. But we haven't even reached that point within our examination of the biblical text. We're only to the third day of creation. This board was empty. This is a word for word, verbatim expose on the entire biblical text, on the entire thing. I have already written 27 volumes from Genesis to Revelations. I have unencrypted the entire biblical text. I have reconfigured it to its original form. And it was not of my doing. It was my calling. Now, days 4, 5, and 6 are extremely paramount. And I strongly suggest that you continue watching these series of videos. Thank you. And please be sure to join me again. Y'all have a great day.